Sometimes you just want a good scare. Here's 10 of the scariest novels ever written that you might not want to read alone in the dark. If you totally lose yourself in a good story, like I do, then where and when you read a scary story matters. Reading a terrifying tale on a sunny summer afternoon is one thing. Good fun. Great story. Think I'll grab another drink. But reading that same story late at night while sitting in a creaky old home that you found as a deal on Airbnb, discovering a beat up wooden staircase that leads downstairs to the unfinished basement, dirt floor, lots of cobwebs, no way to lock that door to the basement. Easily freak yourself out reading a story in that situation. I might be speaking from experience. Here at Fantasy for the Ages, we like to get books in front of you that you may not have heard of yet, or if you've heard of them, you haven't had a chance to experience. Sometimes these will be new books we've come across, but other times, classic ones, because I'm old enough to have experienced books you maybe haven't got around to. They're too old, you haven't even thought about experiencing them. So, with that in mind, today I have some classic, terrifying horror selections that I'd suggest, all ones I've personally read and freaked myself out with. These are ones that are pretty much guaranteed to make you paranoid in the dark, afraid of what that bump was. Is that something happening upstairs? These are the ones you might not be brave enough to want to read in the dark when you're all alone. From the bottom, working my way up the levels of scare factor, let's begin with number 10, Cujo, the 1981 novel by Stephen King. This is about a mother and her young son who are terrorized by a rabid dog, a massive Saint Bernard, trapping them in their car on a hot, brutally hot summer day, and their struggle to survive this ordeal. This is a terribly sad story. No one wants to see a good boy go so bad. And Cujo was a really good boy. And then he wasn't. But it's terrifying in how close to reality the story actually is. Now, let me be clear. You're going to see more Stephen King on this list. His early books, they could scare you beepless. I am not kidding. I miss that quality to King's writing. But number 9 is not Stephen King, and it's even more classic. I'm talking Dracula, the classic novel by Bram Stoker, published all the way back in 1897. And it's still worth your reading time. This is a gothic horror novel that tells the story of Count Dracula's attempt to move from Transylvania to England to spread his undead curse, and the battle waged by a group of people led by Professor Van Helsing to stop this fiend. Dracula's primary reason for making this list is the atmosphere, the creepy dread that Bram Stoker has just literally oozing from the pages, as the people you read about are impacted by both supernatural and psychological horrors. There's a reason this novel has spawned so much literary content and movies and TV shows, and we just fell in love with Dracula and everything about it. Number 8, Jaws by Peter Benchley, published in 1974. Now, I was 4 years old when this book came out, and it changed the world, people. This thriller is about a great white shark that terrorizes a small coastal town. I'll be shocked if you're not familiar with the basics here. And this leads to the local police chief, a marine biologist, and a professional shark hunter to team up and confront this deadly predator, solve the problem plaguing this town. I actually read this book really young because my mom bought it when it was new, and then it's just sitting on the bookshelf. And I'm a 7-year-old first grader seeing it on the bookshelf and wanting to read it. My mom said yes. I was a very advanced reader. Did I understand everything in the book? Certainly not. Did I understand enough to have the crap scared out of me? Absolutely yes. I seriously would not have gone swimming in an ocean after reading that book. Just like a lot of other people. When the movie adaptation came out, the numbers at the beaches, especially East Coast of the US, actually went down measurably. Now, to this day, with that whole thing about Jaws in my background, when I'm swimming in the ocean, I'm thinking about sharks. I can't help it. It's there a little bit. Jaws is so scary because it taps into primal fears of the unknown lurking beneath the surface, turning the ocean, which should be just a place of relaxation, potentially into a deadly environment. And the very unpredictability of where this hidden monster might be is what scares the bejesus out of you. The novel heightens tension by portraying this shark as an unstoppable force of nature, striking with brutal, indiscriminate violence, creating an ever present threat. You just don't know where it's going to turn up next. And then you heighten that terror by isolating these few brave souls who decide to strike out and do something about it on a little boat out in the middle of the ocean with this demonic sea creature on the attack. Number 7, Night Shift, a 1978 short story collection by Stephen King. Night Shift has actually 8 short stories in it, and they all explore various aspects of horror, from supernatural entities and psychological terror to everyday fears turning up to a monstrous level. Each story delves into the macabre and unsettling, showcasing King's ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary and horrifying. What I love about Night Shift is how varied the stories are and how terrifying, literally, King genuinely makes simple, innocent, everyday situations. These should not be so scary, and yet he makes them so. The man had a gift. Again, he doesn't do things quite this way in his books anymore, but I loved it when he did. This gift, it was disturbing and so good. I tried to settle on, okay, which of these would be my favorite short story of the collection? And I couldn't do it. I love them just across the board. So I instead burrowed down to which would be the 3 that disturbed me the most and stuck around in my brain the longest. And those would be the Mangler, the Boogeyman, and Sometimes They Come Back. By the way, these stories are so good that 5 of them have, at least in some way, been adapted to film or television, including the 3 that I just listed. Number 6, Salem's Lot by Stephen King, 1975. This is a horror novel about a writer who returns to his childhood town only to discover that it's being overrun by vampires, forcing him and a small group of survivors to confront this growing undead menace. This story is scary because it transforms this ordinary small town into a nightmarish place where familiar faces are slowly being taken over by a creeping, insidious evil, vampirism. Just coming to grips with believing what's happening is part of the challenge and scare of this book. The novel taps into fears of isolation as the town becomes cut off from the outside world, dealing with its own challenges that seem somewhat inescapable. And then the terror of watching friends, neighbors, loved ones turned into these soulless monsters. It gives me vibes of an invasion of the body snatchers. As with the novel Dracula, a pervasive sense of dread is a huge theme in this story, building as the characters realize that the very fabric of their community is being eroded by a force they barely understand, and that leaves them very vulnerable and all alone. Number 5 is Ghost Story 1979 novel by Peter Straub. This is a horror story about a group of elderly men in a small town who are haunted by a terrifying secret from their past. And this secret manifests as a malevolent supernatural force which threatens their lives and the town itself. I'll tell you, this story starts out seemingly simple enough, just a nice story about people in a small town, but when the stuff starts hitting the fan, it flips over a terror switch. It's just excellent. But it's more than just about what happens. Ghost Story is horrifying because it delves into the terror of past sins coming back to haunt the present, which is something many people can relate to in one way or another. The fun of this novel is how it creates an eerie atmosphere where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, and it leaves characters and us, the readers, unsure of just what is real. The relentless and shape shifting nature of the evil force adds to the terror, making it feel inescapable and deeply unsettling as it exacts vengeance in increasingly terrifying ways. Number 4, another Stephen King novel, this time It, from 1986. This is a horror novel about a group of children who confront an ancient, shape shifting entity that preys on their deepest fears. And after they survive confronting this entity, how they then return as adults to face the same terrifying creature when it resurfaces back in their childhood hometown. It is terrifying because it combines the horror of a predatory, shape shifting entity with the unsettling power of childhood fears, and then the fact that it manifests as a sinister clown. Pennywise. And this clown exploits the deepest anxieties of its victims. The novel also taps into the fear of losing one's childhood innocence and the way that trauma can resurface in adult life, creating a pervasive sense of dread that spans decades. There we go, that sense of dread again. Additionally, King's depiction of a small town with dark, hidden evils that nobody talks about, it amplifies the horror, making the seemingly mundane a focal point for profound and nightmarish terror. And let's double back to the fact that King chose to make the primary appearance of this entity Pennywise the frickin' clown. Come on! As if people aren't already scared enough of them. Number 3, The Shining, also by Stephen King, 1977 publication. This book follows a family who become caretakers of an isolated, haunted hotel. Not that they knew that going into it. And they're going to care for this place during the winter when it's cut off due to weather, and have to deal with the hotel's malevolent supernatural influence, which drives the father into madness and endangers his wife and son. Now, sadly, when people think of The Shining, the first thing that comes in their mind is Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, that 1980 movie adaptation, which I really like, but Stephen King famously despises. And that's why I say it's kind of sad that that's what you think of, because while the movie is a classic, it's honestly nowhere as good or as terrifying as this book. The Shining's horror factor comes from experiencing this family's terror as the aura of this hotel drives the father completely crazy. Now, he had some issues coming into this, but and it happens so subtly but profoundly, and this threatens then his entire family. The novel intensifies fears of losing control and breaking down as a family. And of course, the Overlook Hotel's eerie presence amplifies your creep factor as this is all going on. Again, don't overlook the increased terror of being trapped in an isolated setting. I mean, when this stuff really goes bad, they are completely cut off by snowfall. There's no escape. There's no chance of help. Ugh. Fun trivia. For that 1980 movie, the outside views of the Overlook Hotel are actually the Timberline Lodge high up on Mount Hood in Oregon, just 90 minutes from my house. I've been there multiple times. Good food, great views. Number 2, The Amityville Horror, novel by Jay Anson, written in 1977. This recounts the true story of a family who moves into a house with a horrific past only to experience a series of terrifying experiences with supernatural events that drive them to the brink of insanity. The Amityville Horror is scary because it presents a purportedly true account of this family being haunted by malevolent supernatural forces that are in their home. It creates a chilling sense of reality blending with horror. The novel's unsettling details, including unexplained phenomena, violent disturbances, and the feeling of this oppressive, malevolent presence, amplify the fear of being trapped in a place where danger is all around you and inescapable. I actually visited this house, the true Amityville house, back when I was in college. Now, I was only on the outside. We stopped by. It was a place people knew where it was, and it's at night, and we're looking at the house. And I saw something in one of those two upstairs windows. What I saw, I'm still not sure, but it creeped me out, and we left. But the fact that this novel is based on a true story is what makes this all new levels of terrifying. Okay, number 1, Pet Cemetery. Stephen King novel, 1983. Yes, Stephen King sits at the top of my horror. This novel is about a family that discovers a burial ground that has the literal power to resurrect the dead. But that leads to terrifying consequences when they use it to bring back their deceased pets and then, wait for it, loved ones. This book freaks people out as it explores the disturbing consequences of tampering with the natural order of life and death, as the burial's ground ability to resurrect the dead leads to horrific transformations and, here it comes again, a profound sense of dread. The novel delves into both the psychological and emotional trauma of losing loved ones and the lengths people will go to defy that grief, with the resurrected entities becoming nightmarish shadows of their former selves. Additionally, the story's setting, a seemingly idyllic cemetery turned into a site of unspeakable horror, creates a chilling juxtaposition of innocence and malevolence. Bonus in this one, that 1989 film adaptation, it's horrifying in so many ways. It's a great film, but massively unsettling. That truck scene. Don't watch this alone in the dark, though. I'm going to tell you, because of where this movie goes, you will be freaked out. Okay, I have one honorable mention then. There's my top 10, but I've got one that I have to still give a shout out to, and it's The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, written back in 1959. The reason it's only an honorable mention is I have not read it yet, but Zach has, and he loved it, and he told me I have to read this book. And I've looked up what people say about it, and it's like on everybody's top 10 list. How have I not read this one yet? It's criminal. So it's coming soon, but if I'm recommending books that you ought to look at, I'm going to take Zach's recommendation into account and put this out here. I'm tossing it a bone. You should also consider reading The Haunting of Hill House. Now it's your turn. What are your favorite classic scary novels? Which others should I be adding to my TBR? What are your thoughts on the ones I put out here? Do you have some scary experiences? Have you also rented a creepy Airbnb and totally made it so you couldn't turn the lights out after you were done with that book? Share your experiences and thoughts on books in the comments. And if you want to keep seeing more book recommendations of horror, fantasy, science fiction, be sure to subscribe and click that notification button. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.